this wasn't just about hiding money. This was about building a financial network, an engine to power unimaginable crimes. A corporate darknet operating in plain sight, engineered to conceal a global sex trafficking operation for decades. $1.9 billion. That's not just a number. It's the total value of suspicious transactions that were flagged for just one man's network. And this money, it was flowing through some of the world's biggest banks years after his crimes were already public knowledge. So how did this happen? How is it even possible? Well, to really get it, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to dissect how this web of money and influence was so carefully built, piece by piece. You know, Epstein's story, it's not what you'd expect. He starts out as a teacher, doesn't even have a college degree, but his real skill wasn't in finance, it was in making connections with powerful people. He gets a job at Bear Stearns and quickly starts advising their richest clients. Then he starts his own firm, super secretive, only for billionaires. But the real game changer, 1991. He gets full power of attorney from billionaire Leslie Wexner. I mean, think about that. Total control over a massive fortune. And that was his ticket in. It's what opened the door to JP Morgan Chase, which became the very foundation of his entire financial machine. So this was the image he created, right? The story he sold. I'm a financial genius, I only work with billionaires. But when you look at the actual data, the forensic analysis, the real business was so much darker. The money, it wasn't the goal. It was the tool he used to build a global criminal enterprise. Okay, so let's break down how this empire was actually built. Because it wasn't just about managing money. This was about building an architecture, a whole system designed for one thing: hiding what he was doing. A machine built to make his crimes completely untraceable. And the main tool in his toolkit? The shell company. It sounds kind of boring, right? Just a legal entity on paper? But in reality, it's a black box. Its entire purpose is to make two things disappear: who really owns the money and where that money came from. And listen, he didn't just have one or two of these. Investigators found at least 34 different companies, and they were all part of this strategy. It's called jurisdictional arbitrage. It's a fancy way of saying he shopped around for places with the weakest laws and the most secrecy. And as you can see, he found a favorite. Over half of his companies were in the US Virgin Islands, a place famous for financial privacy. This was no accident. It was a cold, calculated move to turn his network into a ghost. So when you have this kind of setup, all these companies scattered across these secret havens, it's the perfect machine for money laundering. The process is pretty much always the same. It's a three-step dance. First, you place the dirty money into the system. Then you layer it. You bounce it around through that maze of shell companies until no one can trace where it started. And finally, integration. The money comes back to you looking totally clean. Epstein's entire network was designed to do this, over and over without a single flaw. But here's the thing, a machine like this can't run on its own. It needs fuel. It needs a gateway into the real, legitimate financial world. And Epstein's network found that gateway inside two of the biggest banks on Earth. Now, you might be thinking, aren't there rules against this? And yeah, there are. Banks are legally required to know your customer. They call it KYC. They have to verify who you are and report anything that looks suspicious. This is supposed to be the wall, the first line of defense that stops this from happening. But this is what the internal bank documents actually say. Even after Epstein was a convicted sex offender, even after their own systems flagged him as high risk, huge banks like JP Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank kept him on as a client. The quote from the investigation says it all, doesn't it? Compliance recommendations were overruled. Why? Because business interests overrode compliance concerns. It was about the money. And the scale of this relationship, it's just staggering. We're talking about almost 100 different bank accounts over 2 decades. First at JP Morgan, they held 55 accounts for him. And when they finally cut ties in 2013, what happened? He just picked up and moved the whole operation over to Deutsche Bank, and they opened more than 40 new accounts for him. It was seamless. And if you look at the transactions in those accounts, it's like a blueprint for his crimes. The data showed all the classic red flags for human trafficking. We're talking about payments to lots of different people with similar profiles, huge regular cash withdrawals, totally out of character for a supposed billionaire, payments going directly to people who were later identified as his co-conspirators. It was all there.
Every single transaction was a piece of evidence, just sitting there, hiding in plain sight.
So when did the banks finally act? Only after he was dead. That's when JP Morgan went back and filed suspicious activity reports on, get this, 4,725 different transactions. They basically admitted they had all this data the entire time. The system that was supposed to stop him, it only kicked in when it was far, far too late. And this is the part that's really important to understand. The story of Jeffrey Epstein isn't just a story about one criminal. It's the story of a broken system, a complete failure at every single level that was supposed to protect us. The investigation just laid it all bare, deep, fundamental flaws in how things work. You have the shell companies that let the real owners hide in the shadows. You have the banks that were clearly complicit, choosing profit over their legal duties. You have the whole network of enablers, the lawyers, the accountants, who actually build and maintain these secret structures. And on top of it all, you have the regulators who just failed to enforce the rules. What it really shows is a system where the rich and powerful get to play by a completely different set of rules.
So his network was exposed. But that brings up a really chilling question, doesn't it? The methods he used, they weren't special. They weren't unique to him. The shell companies, the banking loopholes, they're all still there. The exact same tools are sitting there, right now, waiting for the next person to use them. So you have to ask, how many more are still out there, operating in the shadows?
The powerful will always rely on complexity to hide what they're doing. Our job is to make it simple, to pull back the curtain. If you believe this work is important, if you believe these systems need to be exposed, then subscribe to support real cyber investigations.